Good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us. Today we have Amy Bonebright with us, and I'm very excited to introduce her to all of my writing friends. I've known Amy for more than 25 years, which is hard to believe. But before I met her when she was a college student at Liberty, and now she is a professor of journalism there. And I've thought for a long time, oh, I need to get her into this writing group and share some great wisdom that she has with us. And so, just a little bit of a background with Amy. I know a few months ago we had Melanie Dobson, and I asked you, Amy, then if you knew her because she kind of had the same writing path as you did, going to Liberty and doing journalism, and then going to Regents University. But now she's a very prolific fiction writer, and so she was sharing us with us on that path. But you've stayed kind of in the journalism path, not only writing for all kinds, and I'm going to just ask you to tell us all about that in a minute, but not only writing for all kinds of different medias, but also teaching that and being very instrumental in setting up the journalism program at Liberty, which is very exciting. We have several Liberty parents in our group, and several and actually we've got some former journalists in the group too. I think Rosemary actually might be one of them, but who have gone on to write in different genres, particularly fiction. Anyway, yeah, can you just tell us a little bit more of your writing background and what you're studying now, and really what is digital media? That's one of your big things now, and it's kind of a word that has a lot of different meanings. So maybe just give us a little bit of a background and tell us about what you're moving into now.
Okay. Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm so excited to be on here and to share with all of you guys and to just get a little bit more of an introduction to what you guys do. So, like Keri said, I've been in journalism for a while. I was raised in a family. I can always remember my mom having the news on and reading the newspaper, even, up until the last several years, doing that every day. So it was something that was very interesting to me, was what was going on in the world. And when I was a teenager, I grew up in Chattanooga, our local newspaper, there was two of them, but one of them had a little teen edition. And I remember going downtown and like going into the news office and writing for that. And I just thought it was so much fun to be on the front lines, to be in the know of what was going on. And I used to get this Christian magazine called Brio. And I remember I knew a little bit about Liberty and I knew that I wanted journalism. And they had this article, where to go to school if you want to study. And then it had all these categories. And I remember saying journalism and Liberty, and it was like, oh, this is a match. So God led me to Liberty. I studied journalism there, and it was everything that I thought it would be. I always say you should go into a field that you love, even if it doesn't pay a lot, and journalism doesn't pay a lot, but God is the great provider of all things. And so he opened the doors to continue working in the field in newspaper. It was kind of the heyday. I mean, there were so many jobs in newspapers when I graduated in the late 90s. And so it wasn't difficult to get a job. I got to cover a lot of different beats, and it was a smaller operation. So I got to do design, I got to do photography, and just cover a lot of different, tell a lot of different stories. And so that was really fascinating to me. But I always knew that I wanted to go back to school at some point, because journalism is quite a crazy schedule, and I desired to have a family. And so I wanted to have options. And I studied at Regent University, like you said, Keri, but they had a satellite campus up in Northern Virginia. And I thought, what better place to study journalism than Washington, D.C.? And of course, that was quite exciting. I moved up there just literally weeks before 9/11. And on September 11th, 2001, my roommate and I, we like drove into the city. We drove over to the Pentagon and took pictures. And that point in history, making so much news, just being there, watching it unfold, hearing from different speakers was really impactful. And so to be able to take that information and see how God would use it in the future to train up students to do that kind of work, how he has planned out the path has been just amazing to see. So I ended up back after graduation with my master's, working as a managing editor. And at that time, everything was kind of, what's this internet and what are we going to do with this website? And, people pay for this subscription to the newspaper, but are we going to give them the information for free? And so we tried to figure out a little bit of that. but got the website up and rolling. And then God moved me over here to Liberty to start working in the online program as technology and the internet was kind of taking that off, and then continued to open doors as he always has, with an adjunct position teaching media writing, and then opened the door for me to be full time. Something like 16, 17 years ago now, I've been teaching. And it was right before I had my daughter. So that's how I can always do that math. But it's just to be able to think of all the students that have been in my classroom and the amazing work that they're doing now. It's just been more than I ever could have imagined that God had for me. Right now, though, I am back in school working towards a terminal degree. We have a new program here at Liberty, a master's in fine arts. And that's a terminal degree in this area. It's a hands-on area called digital media production. And so that a lot of what that has to do with, especially nowadays, is multimedia type of stuff. So camera work, production, post, pre-planning, storytelling, just using different tools. And I just started in that program in January. So back in school and teaching school, and all of that kind of together is where my heart is right now.
Yeah, educators have to be lifelong learners. So good
That's right.
job. Yeah. So what classes are you teaching right now? Well, I mean, okay, in the
Yeah.
fall, I guess you're probably done for the summer, but like what are your main classes that you teach?
Well, I feel really fortunate that one of the classes that I focus on is the introductory class. It's for all our digital media and journalism students. And so I really get them at the beginning when they're excited and, they're most of them are a little bit new to Liberty. And so we get to explore writing, even though they might be studying audio, they might be studying videos. A lot of them are studying journalism, especially sports journalism. I try to bring all of that together and say, even if video is your passion, what avenues for your website or for your app or for social media do you have to focus on writing? And so we talk about that. I teach another class that is more like local news, community journalism. I've taught blogging, I've taught social media writing, opinion and editorial. But one that I teach every year as well is investigative reporting. And so that's a lot of fun as well. We talk a lot about, should Christians be involved in investigative journalism? Should they investigate their own organizations or nonprofits or charities or churches, and what that looks like. And then, of course, we talk about, Woodward and Bernstein and all the fun, big stories that have blown up in journalism history.
Wow. That I feel like I just want to enroll in all your classes because I
Oh,
mean those are
you're
all
a
things
great
that we
writer.
all need help with. But I mean just as we have writers that are in every stage, and one of the big things is developing your website, developing your platform, and it all can be very overwhelming, and I would say most of us are doing it without a classical study in that. What do you think are some of the most important things that writers who are I would say a lot of us are in the with want to be published, but really our heart is for ministry and for speaking the truth into lives. What are some key things that we can do to push beyond the numbers that the publishers want or whatever?
Yeah. Well, I think, cultivating your audience, your very specific audience through your social media, through your friends, through your family is a good way to do that to begin. And, building a message, really reaching out to other people that write in the same area that you do and linking up with them so that you can promote their work and they can promote your work, or they can help you, they can guide you, they can offer suggestions. I think that those are all good things to do. Always be looking for new avenues. I think a lot of it just goes back to very simple marketing or advertising or PR. It's like, who is your target audience? What is your message? Where is your target audience? How can you find them and effectively, tell them what you're doing? I think at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the day, though, every writer has, a passion, a topic, a subject that they want to touch on. But if you're not really honing in on making sure that your grammar is neat, that your message is clear, I obviously love a concise message. We don't have to be wordy to say something that's important. We can say it in a very concise and powerful way. And so if you do everything else and then your message is all muddy because you haven't really spent a lot of time cleaning it up, then that can really stand in the way.
Hmm.
So all those
Hmm.
things together are really important.
Yeah, it's a message that we hear frequently. So, Rosemary asked, can you list out what digital media includes? I think we're going to be hearing that term a lot coming up.
Yeah, I think classically digital media included what we call broadcast. So that would have been television and radio, which still traditionally is very important and reaches a large audience, especially in other countries. Nowadays, though, we would say things like videography, maybe a little bit of photography, some social media. I would really categorize it more broadly as multimedia, having that eye to be able to tell a story across different platforms. And of course, there's going to be
Mm,
people that are very strong in telling their story through taking, great video and putting together well lit shots and making sure that the audio is crisp. But there's also those that are really strong at the storytelling and making sure that that vein of the story comes through loud and clear. So bringing that all together is really the larger picture of digital media. It involves a lot of small parts, though, and our students study
mm,
here at Liberty a lot of those different parts. So videography, audio, and then the writing would be the larger categories in
mm,
digital media.
mm. Okay. Rosemary, if you need to follow up on that question, go ahead and click in and do that. Um, so what are you seeing in the students who are entering your classroom? Like,
Yeah.
what's their skill level? What's their passion? And what is the climate like for them as Christians entering journalism?
That's a good question. Don't let me forget to come back to that one because that
Okay.
is even
All
a
right.
little bit different than, what am I seeing in students? And I think what I'm seeing in students is that what a lot of us are dealing with in our own life is the idea of being distracted. And even when we say, okay, I'm going to focus and I'm going to sit through this sermon and not pay attention to anything else, our minds are wandering because we have enabled ourselves to be, gatherers of very quick little tidbits of information. In fact,
Mm,
over the weekend, when the news started to break about the shooting at former President Trump's rally, I had traditional television on, with the broadcast going, and information is very slow to come out. So I was on Twitter, on X, scrolling and looking and gleaning and seeing, and I thought, like, this is such, like, I can't even just sit here and wait. Like, I have been so driven and used to getting information at such a quick pace that that's what I'm trying to do, even though what's probably going to be most trustworthy is what I'm seeing on the television. They're probably vetting the information out.
mm,
That's why it's coming out at a slower pace. Um,
mm,
so for students, they're just I have them for 50 minutes, for 75 minutes, and it's so hard for them not to grab their phones. They all take notes on a laptop and they've got alerts and message. Their parents are messaging them, their roommates asking them about a shirt that they can wear. And all that stuff is kind of coming in while they're trying to take notes. It's hard. It's very difficult. And so I really am open to new ways and always trying to think of new ways that I can entertain teaching and really bring in. I love having discussion, but I see less and less of students wanting to be vulnerable and raise their hand and participate in much more of a discussion based classroom than me just standing up there talking. I think that's so boring.
mm.
I would much rather hear from them, and they're, avid users of this technology and of, receiving messages in that way, but they're less and less likely to say things just because that idea, I think, of being wrong or the idea of failure that we have sheltered a lot of our kids from, really comes into the classroom where they just want to sit there and be told.
Mm,
So that's something, the distraction, the lack of focus, the lack of discipline is something. I think the writing is always going to be a little bit like, oh, people are going to struggle with it, or they're going to come from a background where maybe it wasn't the strongest subject that they were taught. that really, I don't think has gotten any worse. It's always kind of a struggle to begin with. Um, but I think those are the biggest things. The other thing that I would say has the ease now of the ability to cheat. You know, it used
Mm,
to be something that took a lot of effort, and you really had to take a lot of steps intentionally to cheat. And now, just with these websites that are built around this idea of helping students, they say, oh, we're just giving you study guides. And it's really just literally the work that other students have done. And now, of
mhm.
course, with AI, doing some really bad writing, but doing writing for the students nonetheless, you know, when they're in a pinch and they have that temptation, you know, probably more of them are falling into that than they would have in the past. But those are the things I think overall. What was the question about
Yeah.
journalism?
Um, what's the climate like for them as Christians entering journalism?
Well, I think that there's more avenues than ever before. I don't think journalism, one thing I always tell our parents, especially because they're very concerned, what can my student do with this degree when they graduate? What kind of work can they get? I say the idea of studying journalism means that you're learning how to be some of the best communicators using the written word out there. And tell me a business that does not need that. You know, every
Mhm.
business needs that. Every nonprofit needs that. Everybody that's running a website needs somebody that can communicate using the written word. And so to me, that's what it means. So for them, they have more avenues than ever before. You know, we have students that go into ministry, that write for websites, that do church media. I have students that work for, you know, new startup websites that might be about sports or might be about local news. And then, of course, we have students that go into politics. We have students that go into, you know, just traditional journalism, working for a TV station or working for a written form of journalism. So there's a lot of avenues, maybe even more so than ever before, because of the
Mhm.
websites and the way that
Mhm.
ministries now have more of an international reach than they ever did in the past. Storytelling has become really key to nonprofits. And so
Mhm. Mhm.
journalists are really good to employ there because they can tell accurate stories and you know, really encapsulate what the organization is doing by showing it through the people that they tell a story about.
Mhm. How about Christians in um, public journalism? I mean, like um, going into the mainstream media, basically, and how what's the climate like for them? Are they um, like if a company looked at a student from Liberty, would they go, "Oh, they're so conservative, we don't want them here," or do they get a fair shot? I mean, or you know, what's the climate for them going into the mainstream media?
Yeah, I haven't heard of any stories of students that would get passed over for that. And in fact, you know, I came out of the Dr. Jerry Falwell, Liberty University, who was probably was very controversial in his day and age, and that never was a factor for me. And in fact, when I got into the newsroom, I was kind of surprised that, oh, guess what? These are other humans who, you know, might not believe the same thing that I do, but that's okay. My neighbors don't either, or you know, the people that I'm friends with, you know, because our kids play at the park together, you know, they might not believe exactly like I do as well, but we can still get along. We can still do our job. And they respect that and believe that. So I never had a problem with that. I haven't heard of students having a problem with
Mhm.
it. I think that for any employer, what they are really concerned with is not so much where you got your degree, but how good is your work? What did you do
Mhm.
while you were in school? What's your portfolio look like? Where did you do your internship? What kind of work can you come and do for me now? And that's really what's going to be the sales point.
Mhm.
Um, that's how
Mhm.
we tell our students you need to get in and start
Mhm.
doing work right now. So that really I
Mhm.
think is more along the lines of what employers are looking for.
Mhm. Well, and you know, and in Dr. Falwell Senior's words, if it's Christian, it ought to be better. And I think
Yeah.
that if you're putting out students who do quality work with integrity, that's really what the employers hopefully are looking for. So that's good.
Yeah,
Um,
that's one thing I think, Keri, that you and I had chatted about previously was this idea of truth. And really here, the thing that I want to impress upon my students in any way that they are telling a story, you know, we serve somebody who is the capital T truth. You know, he is the person
right.
that is everything that is true and good and beautiful. And so we should strive for that, whether it's in a social media post personally that we're writing or that we're sharing, or it's in, a piece of work that we're doing for our job. The standard of what is true is the highest calling that we have as Christians. And so we should always be, striving for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And I love that's really your passion is speaking the truth, no matter how controversial or difficult that is, and letting that come through to your students. Because what we see a lot of times is truth has become relative, and it's really not. Even when you might have a different perspective, and we know that every journalist, every human being has bias, but the truth is the truth.
Yeah.
So.
And we talk a lot too in our classes. And I think this is important, is that, we shouldn't be afraid of what people who maybe believe things that aren't correct. We know what the truth is. We know what God's truth is, and how that is the
you
correct.
Froze up there for a minute.
Oh, we should not be afraid to tell the other side of the story that maybe is the side that is for abortion, because we know at the end of the day that God's truth wins out. And we shouldn't shy away from things that are hard topics. We shouldn't shy away from things that we don't believe in or that we know are wrong, or talking to people in those arenas, because we know at the end of the day that God's truth is what ultimately wins out. It can overcome the others. And so we don't want to hide what they're having to say. He didn't. He went straight to the people, the Pharisees, and to the sinners. And so we want to present, all sides, knowing that God's truth is what has the power and will reign over all.
True. So we have several former journalists in the group. So can you speak to how a degree or background in journalism can translate into other forms and genres of writing?
Yeah. And again, I think that it just means that you're really good, a good communicator with the written word. And so that's important. It could be something like working for your church at home and putting together the email newsletter that they send out every week, or what they print out, to hand out on Sunday mornings. It could be working for a missionary organization and helping missionaries that are overseas put together their prayer letter that they send out, or get their website up and running, or help them with their social media content. It could be, working for a local media group that you have, and going around and telling the stories of people in your community or the issues that they face. And I think that even stories that aren't overtly Christian, or aren't even ones that are about somebody having a religious experience, they still can point people to God through the message that they send. And so those are important stories to tell. So those are some of the ways I think nowadays that you can find journalism and journalists using their degrees in any area of writing. I think research as well. We should be, I always tell my students, you should be the best Googlers. You should be able to find information and find it very quickly, and find good and accurate, and be discerning of the information that you find. And so research and data, those are two really big areas that we've seen students be able to get jobs, if that's something that's their niche, if they like doing that, running numbers and things like that. Yeah.
Do you have any of your students that have gone into like fiction writing or something of that nature that you know of? Or
I do. I've had a couple students publish short books or novels after they graduated. I think for the most part, those students tend to come out of the creative writing program in our English area. But I have had a couple of journalism students publish some creative work after they graduated. So yeah, I think, if you're a writer, you always have, you see so many stories everywhere you look. And that might be something that you make up, that you design a world that you have on your own. So not as frequent, but yeah, I have seen that come about.
May I ask a question?
Yep.
Uh, so as Kara, sorry, your name says Kara, but I know
I
that's not you.
know. Yeah, I'm just playing. I'm Kara today.
Anyway, as she said, I was a journalist. I was a little ahead of you. I was a journalist in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. So it's fascinating to me to hear someone who stayed in it, because I didn't. I veered off, and I wrote fiction for a while, and got married, raised my family, and and now I've circled back to nonfiction because as a former journalist, it's easier to write nonfiction. You know, you gather your
Mm.
facts, you put them into a good order, you make them appealing, and it's so much easier than making up your own stuff. But here's my question.
Okay.
Knowing what the current journalism climate is and what's out there, how is the best way for us Christian writers um, to get our work out there? Not talking about getting the book out, like we've got the book out. Do they still do feature articles on our authors? Do they still come and cover book signings? Like, in what way can we call upon our journalists to help publicize our Christian books?
What kind of Christian books are you talking about?
So mine is inspirational nonfiction.
Okay.
So it's sort of, I call it story-driven spiritual self-help, but it's being traditionally published. And I'm just wondering, back in the old days, the local newspaper would come and interview, oh, we have a local author, da da da, maybe they'd come cover the book launch, that kind of stuff. But that was back in the 80s and 90s. Nowadays, everything's online. There's no newspaper to open up and look at feature articles and things like that. Do they still cover things? Do they still do that kind of thing?
Yes, and I would say that's part of the problem that especially local news is facing is a lack of budget. Like they have no money because they shot themselves in the foot. They gave away their content for free for so long, and now to try to pull that back. In the meantime, they've been bought up. Like our local newspaper here is owned by some group out, in the Midwest. It's got a skeleton staff. So I would say you play that to your advantage and you put together something that you would like to see, and you basically cater it and say, hey, I wrote this up for you. You can take it, you can modify it. I'm a local author, and pitch your story in that way to them. And because they have a skeleton staff, they might be more able to just go ahead and run your piece as it is. If you said that you're covering, like you wrote inspirational stories, you've interviewed other people, is that what I'm understanding, and written their
No,
inspirational story?
no, it's actually stories of the saints. So, and it's according to their temperaments. So,
Oh,
for
cool.
example, Paul was very choleric and Peter was very sanguine, and Mary Magdalene was all about her emotions. She was melancholic sanguine, and then taking those examples and showing how can we apply them to our life today. The
Oh,
the
that's
mention of
cool.
interviews was just back when I was a journalist, we would interview local authors when they had a book out.
Yeah.
That was my reference to interviews.
Yeah, definitely. So I would say be out there searching and looking for some types of gatherings of people online, groups um, that have an interest in this. I don't know if, like, who's your target audience for your book. I would be out there looking for where are those groups, because they will take your content. They might be the ones that do the interview with you nowadays, more so than local media. They might be the ones that want to have you on their podcast and interview you about what you're writing about. It might be Christian women's groups, it might be Christian media groups. I would say don't discount the local media. I would call the local TV station for sure. And like I said, write something up. And as much as you can give to them already done, it's probably more likely to be picked up and used as is. But there's a lot more avenues out there. And so I would be on the search for those groups for sure.
So, Amy,
Thank you.
would you say like write a press release kind of thing to
write
send out?
a good write a good press release, because press releases are very classically horribly written. But yeah, as much as you can, I would say yes, give that angle in the lead about the local person, because that's going to be where they go, oh, this is something that people might want to know about. And then from there, just reveal a little bit of information, where they can buy your book, what it's about, and so on.
Good.
Thank you.
Um, did you have a follow-up? Are you good, Rosemary?
I'm just sort of listing out some of the things you said. So the local news, they're more of a skeleton staff, but try them. The online groups, the podcasts. I'm just wondering if there's anything like, are there particular Christian news stations or Christian sources that I could go after? Just trying to kind of make a list of who to go after.
Oh yeah, I mean, World Media, I was just down at their offices in Asheville last fall, and they have got a lot going on as far as Christian media goes, um, in a lot of different avenues. And so I would definitely look at that. You're just going to have to get out there and look and see. Part of the thing about the internet is that there is so much out there. It takes a little bit to get in and find out. But for example, I have a friend who is a more of a fiction writer, and she has really done a lot of legwork cultivating where are the groups that already exist that would be interested in the pieces that I put together. And so she will have, this article that she wrote about her sons being neurodivergent and how to parent them, up on one of these websites, because she has gotten in there with that group and really cultivated a relationship where they want to publish her stuff. So there's a lot more avenues than just the local news. And so you've got to find and tap into those groups of people. And then of course, self-promotion, you probably need to set up a Facebook that is like, your name is Rosemary. I assume that your name is correct on the screen. Okay. So, author Rosemary, something like that. Or maybe I wouldn't name it about the title of your book, because that really limits you to that book only. But, get yourself something that you can get out there and start with your friends and family and say, hey, I've got this up. Would you follow it? Would you like it? And then start pushing out a lot of content.
It's funny you say author Rosemary, because on Instagram I'm rosemary.writer.
There you go.
So, almost
I would
exactly
try to
what
keep
you
it the
said.
same then across the board, so that people can find you in multiple avenues under the same name.
Yes. So I am doing that part of it,
Yeah.
but thank you. This is
Good.
very helpful.
Yeah, good. So in that same vein, it seems like as writers, it used to be you wrote and then everybody else did all the technical work, and there really wasn't even that much technical work to it. Now, as writers, we're expected to be technical experts too. Do you have any tools that kind of maybe will help take some of the pain out, or suggestions of where we can go to get more like step-by-step training? I mean, everybody tells us you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this, but very few people tell us how to do that. Start a website or build a website, or whatever it is. Yeah. So some tips and tools there.
I would say LinkedIn Learning is a great resource. I haven't personally gotten out there and used it that much, but I know a couple of professors that create a lot of content for it. So I cannot speak to if it is totally free or if you have to have the premium version of LinkedIn, but there is a lot of good stuff on LinkedIn. I would also say one of my favorite ways of learning is observing. So my social media is constantly shifting with who I follow and who I'm watching. I love to see how are different people, different companies, different organizations utilizing their social media, and is it working? And so I would say observation is a large part of that. So getting out there and looking and seeing how are other people doing things. What are they doing that's new? There is a lot of helpful stuff. I mean, you can find almost anything on YouTube. It is amazing. I tell my kids this all the time, or students, they'll come up and ask me, how do you do X, Y, Z? And I'm like, you didn't already go to YouTube and try to figure that out? Like, who are you? Like, I thought of that first, but I actually had to teach my son how to tie a tie. And I was like, YouTube, how to tie a tie, because that's not my area of expertise. So there's a lot of helpful information out there for free as well. But LinkedIn Learning, obviously, they're going to vet the people and have a very, kind of similar platform for how they roll out their courses. And then, like I said, you should be somebody that can go to a platform, a search engine, and be able to pull up something in a very concise way, a targeted way with the terms that you're using to do a search, to be able to get good results returned to you. And then what I would do right now, especially, is just scroll right past that AI generated content that Google is putting right at the top and start looking for websites that you recognize and have credibility to them. And those would be platforms that you could go and say, okay, how did they do this? Or can they teach me, how to do something? One thing that is a caution is that everybody is going to have a financial motive. So if you are out there just looking for free courses, they might be promoting a software or a different way to do something because they're getting paid by that platform. And a lot of times, unethically, they're not putting that up front and saying, oh, hey, this group pays us to put this content out there. So you have to be very cautious of that as well. So look for those that are objective, in how they're leading you to learn a new software or, maximize your website. Those would be the places that I would go to for sure.
Okay. So let me see. Somebody else sent some questions in, and I want to look at it here. So she said she's curious if the inverted pyramid writing style is still in use and how we can apply it to blog posts. So can you maybe give us a little bit of what that is?
Something inverted pyramid means most important information goes right away up top. And especially with how you see stuff online with people's attention spans are very short, giving them, here's what's happened right away does not mean that they stop reading. Like, you want to be such a good writer. I tell my students this, that you encourage them to keep reading for details and to hear what people have to say. But that blurb right at the top is really key to draw people in to the piece. And I would say that has to be balanced with it's accurate with what your piece promises to provide. Like, don't oversell, because people that get burned are out of there. They're not going to come back. They're not going to subscribe to your Substack or, your newsletter, whatever it is, if you're not delivering on what you promise. So your headline, your little preview of what your piece is in the beginning to your story is very important in drawing them in. And it has to sell the accuracy of the story below. So don't overpromise in it. But yes, I think it is very important still to this day to be able to write in that fashion. That doesn't mean that other styles, longer form, don't work well. Of course, they're really important to give us a lot more in-depth and details to a subject. But to get a lot of information that people need for their daily lives, about their community, about their state, about their region, about the subjects that they want to know about, they need it in a very quick manner. And inverted pyramid does that very quickly.
Okay. And then she was, let's see, she asked a question that I think you already answered, but there's two other things. One, what are the best and worst leads you've ever read over the years? And then also, what effect have podcasts, social media, and paywalls had on journalism? So those are two separate, one probably simple and the other one's a little bit more complicated. So
yeah. So I think I was thinking about different kinds of leads, and I'm really bad about like watching a movie and I forget everything that just happened right away. So pulling examples is difficult, but I would say I had some funny examples to show my students about the media company Gannett was caught using AI to write some of their sports stories, and they were just horrible. I actually pulled one up, so I just want to read through it. It's so short. The lead is not that bad. So the lead just says, this team defeated this team in this sport. But then it says, Worthington Christian edged Westerville North 2-1 in a close encounter of the athletic kind for an Ohio boys soccer victory. It says, Worthington Christian drew first blood by forging a 2-1 margin over Westerville. And then the closing is, the scoreboard was in hibernation in the final half with neither team scoring. So it's just kind of like, if you think that AI is taking over, it has provided us with a lot of useful tools. It is not a good replace. I like to say it's a good help. It's a good aid for you. It's not a replacement. And so you can see there, pulling language that means the same thing does not necessarily work all the time. So I thought that was pretty funny. Best leads, I think, are ones that really set up a good story. And they give you this right away picture of what's going on and draw you in. And that could be a feature story. It could be about an event that took place. It could be about, something that's going to happen. But if it draws you in right away, I remember reading a story all the way from start to finish about a subject I cared nothing about, but it taught me a lot about, it was about free diving. I don't care about free diving. And these people, these divers that go down in the, right, crazy.
Mhm.
It caught my eye because of the picture. I read through it from start to finish. I'm not practicing free diving. That's scary to me, but it caught my attention right away and kept me entertained all the way through, painted a beautiful picture. If a story does that, that's good writing.
Good. Yeah. So then how can journalism influence? Oh, so no, I read that one already. What effect have podcasts and social media and paywalls had on journalism?
Those are three like starkly different things. So first, let me do my
Right.
favorite, which is podcasts. I am a huge fan of podcasts. They don't cost a lot to produce. There's a lot of really good journalistic podcasts out there. I listen to them all the time. And but there's a lot that are just people sitting around talking too, like two women that just get together and talk about crime in their area, which to me is not. I like something that's fact-based and that gives me more of an in-depth look behind maybe a topic, or takes on a story. So I think podcasts are great. You don't have to pay for them. I always just use Apple Podcast, and that's completely free. So those I think are great. But again, there's so many out there. Finding good ones is really just, ask around, ask your friends. Paywall. Okay. The New York Times has done a pretty good job utilizing a paywall and kind of backpedaling from this idea that we said, oh, hey, we want you to pay to get this product, but we're going to give it to you for free online. And then now we're going to kind of walk it back and make you pay for it. And in the meantime, we've seen a real targeted campaign against just the media and journalists as a whole, as being purveyors of lies and untrustworthy. And of course, there are people out there like that. But as a whole, the media, the journalists that are in your town that are covering city council and the school board and local elections and taxes and high school sports, those people are 100% doing a great job every day. And so the larger kind of black eye on the media has really impacted local media because it carries over in that fashion. So when you ask people to pay for something that they're already kind of distrusting, and they're being fed this narrative about don't trust the media, it's untrustworthy, a lot of them are not going to give up that little bit of money every day. They want the work done for free for some reason and given to them for free. So the paywall has been difficult. I think we're going to have to continue to work at telling stories in a multimedia way. And like I said, the New York Times does a fantastic job of doing that. They don't just tell written stories anymore. They have games, they have podcasts, they have videos, they have short reads, they have long reads, and their kind of model of what a media company is nowadays is one that local media can follow. Of course, it costs a lot of money to do that. So there's that factor as well. But that's kind of what a paywall is up against for subscribers. And then the third thing was social media. Well, social media is a great tool to be able to pass along information, stories. Unfortunately, it doesn't come out in a timely manner. So you could be covering a car wreck and put it up on your Facebook, and somebody might see that 3 days later. That's obviously not helpful. Another factor is then you get this long, kind of everybody having their own opinion about the car wreck and the person driving in a conversation underneath that most of the times ends up being harmful and not helpful. So there's that factor as well to storytelling through social media. But it has been a good source to make connections to your community, to tap into what people are talking about, to listen and say, in these groups that people have, mostly centered around their communities, what are they talking about and who are good sources? And so in that aspect, it has become a good tool. I don't know. Social media is such a mixed bag, and the algorithm changes all the time. It's just really hard. I don't know. That's kind of all that I have to say about it.
Yeah. So would you say we should use social media as a tool for ourselves and our message, but not let social media use or control us? Does that
like
even
any
make
media,
sense?
for sure.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Like any media,
So,
for sure.
and then in that, on the same vein, if you would, what news source do you believe is the most reliable? Is there a particular brand or a particular, newspaper company, whatever? What's the
Yeah.
most reliable news source?
I wouldn't pin it on one thing. What I encourage people to do is be out there watching, listening, and reading a variety of sources and opinions. And one thing that the internet has done a very good job of is catering what we see to who we are and what we say that we like. And so if we say, I believe this way, or I like this red backpack, we're going to get a lot of red backpack ads, but oh, maybe I was looking at that for my child and that's not something that I'm interested in. Maybe I'm interested in something else. All we're going to continue to see is what the algorithm says that we're interested in. And so you have to be intentional about cultivating sources outside of just what you like or what you listen to or what aligns with your belief. And
Mm.
I think as a Christian, like, we shouldn't just be only learning and strengthening our own beliefs. We should be trying to understand, what do other people believe? What leads them to think that? We should also be
Mhm.
valuing them for the fact that they were created by Christ, and the life that he gave them. And so if we can learn more about who they are through reading what they produce or watching what they put up there, or listening to their point of view, I think that those are good things. Can it lead to something where somebody who is more open to, different points of view ends up then believing something that's not true? For sure. So you have to do it with
Mm.
a discerning eye. But, I'm out there watching. I have CNN, I have Fox News, I have NBC. I love podcasts by the New York Times, by NPR. Um, the Dispatch is a new media company that I really love. They're doing a lot of good work. So there's a lot out there. I think, even new, that's coming up, that, next year there'll be 5 new things that we'll be talking about. But really
Mhm.
just filling with a variety is what I would preach and what I would hope for people to do. And you can see across the board, there's going to be a lot of good, consistent information, that you'll find very similar across all those platforms, because they're all doing, at the end of the day, a pretty okay job of telling the truth. Most of the time, what we mistake for a, media bias is an opinion that they've paid somebody to come on air and talk about,
Mm.
and not true journalism, which is where they have
Mm.
people out in the field doing the reporting. That for the
Mhm.
most part has stayed as objective as it could. Um, so that's just some of my
Interesting.
thoughts, and what I encourage
Mhm.
students to do.
Yeah. Well, we're almost to the end of our time here, and I have a couple of more questions. And one is just another question. The other one is what we like to end with. But what have been some of your favorite moments or successes as a writer and or as a teacher? Um, I think that kind of a lot of what brings us joy is where those successes are.
Oh yeah, definitely. One of my favorite things ever was, we had a Washington Post reporter that contacted our department, and she said, "I want to come down and I want to see what Christian journalism students are studying and how they're studying." And so my boss asked if anyone wanted to be willing to host this reporter in their classroom. And although it
Nice.
petrified me, I was like, definitely, I would love to. So we had this Washington Post reporter come into my community journalism class, and we had a discussion about truth and about journalism.
Wow.
And this was really particularly at a time when the media was being targeted. So a lot of students would say, they go back home and they say, "I'm studying journalism," and people would be like, even nowadays, they go, "What in the world? Why would you do that? Why would you go into that field?" Well, of course, Christians should not just be limited to fields that are good and pure. We should go into fields that are mission fields that, we can use to tell others about Christ. And so she came in and she wrote this really long article that was in the print edition. It was on the website. And when I read it, of course, I was very nervous. I was like, how is everything going to come across? I mean, she conveyed beautifully what the students had said about, what they feel as a Christian studying journalism. And I had other journalists, one now that works at the New York Times, writing me saying, your students, man, that was awesome. That article that they put, who they are and what they say is important to them. I'm just so encouraged to see the next generation, carrying on these things that we feel to be important. That to me was one of the most, that was the proudest I think that I've ever been, is that we could have that go. And that piece was passed into so many other newspapers or websites across the country, that other people got to read about it too. So those are the little things I think. When I see a student that's out there that's graduated and is doing a job, and they espout the values that we've talked about in class, that to me is like, oh, I can't, yes, they got it. What that feeling, Keri, as
yeah,
a teacher.
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah, and that all comes from God.
Exciting.
That is what He has allowed us, that ability to be able to be in there and sharing that with them.
Yeah, that's so cool. Maybe Amy, if you could send me the link to that article, I'll put it up on our writer's block so everybody can read that, because I remember reading that, and I mean, it made me proud for our alma mater, but it made me proud and happy for you too, because that's what we want to see. So the last thing, we as writers always want to support each other in the work that we're doing. Is there something that you're working on now besides your master's degree, or is there some way that we can support you, or where is your work that we can see it? I know a lot of your work is being poured into your students, and it's not visible to the general public until they go out and write. But where would you point us to see your work or to support you?
Well, one of the things that I'm just now kind of coming out of is having young kids. My oldest is going to be a senior in high school, and then I have my son is going to be a sophomore, and then I have another son who's going to be in 8th grade. So my time has not been that available, with teaching a real heavy load, and then having a family, to doing a lot of outside writing. But I do get called upon every now and then, several times a year, by a Forbes reporter who asked me for an opinion about social media and journalism. And so I love doing that. Every once in a while, I've been on a TV show before, a broadcast, talking, but I've also presented in academic settings. And that, again, is not really catered towards a writing group. So as of right now, I don't have a lot that's going on, but to me, I just love hearing what other people are doing with their work, and how they're trying to figure out the new tools that we have. Technology has just changed everything, and it's changing it at such a breakneck speed. We are all just trying to keep up. And so I love any ideas that you guys might have that you'd love to send me. If you ever have, an intern that's working with you, and you're like, oh man, they really need to work on this skill, or they're lacking in this area, I would love to know all of that from you guys. So I just think one of the best ways that you can help anyone is just keep in touch, and let me know if you have anything that you've been thinking of, that's questions to be answered, or tips that you can provide me for what I pass along to the students.
Okay, so can I put up your email? This group is private. This podcast will go out publicly, but our group is private. So you're okay if I put your email up for the group if they have questions or ideas? Okay.
I'll do that. Definitely. I'm on Twitter too. You've got Amy is my username, and I'm not, again, like, these social media websites can be so toxic. So I've been ratioed before on Twitter. So I don't put too much out there. And then of course, in my position as a professor, I always want to try to be as professional as I can. So, but that's out there as well.
Okay. Anything else you want to add to today's lesson? It's been great. I've loved this. It's been so informative, and it's been really good. Rosemary, do you have anything else?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you.
Oh, it's been my pleasure, for sure. I sound like Chick-fil-A, but it really has been my pleasure. I love this. And I think this is the really good side of social media and the internet, is that it allows you to connect with people that necessarily aren't right down the street from you, and provide support and, bounce ideas off of each other. So kudos to you guys for what you're doing.
Yeah. Thanks, Amy. I know that there will be a lot of people who couldn't make it today, but are going to be excited to watch this later. So I think that you've provided a lot of really valuable information and insight for them. So thanks
That's awesome.
for doing that.
If they drop a question on the YouTube stream, I'll be happy to jump in there and answer. So for sure, if anyone has a question, you can drop it in there, and I'll jump in and put something up too.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording now. If you want to, you can stay on for another second though. So hold on.